For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today we are getting holly and jolly. This is 2025's Silent Night, Deadly Night. So this version of Silent Night, Deadly Night essentially follows the same story beats as the original 1984 cult classic of the same name. Follows a kid named Billy as he wreaks havoc in a Santa suit. This one comes with a little bit of a twist. So the best way that I can describe this version of the story is good but messy. So for those of you guys that do not know, Silent Night, Deadly Night is a series that ran essentially at its core from 1984 with its controversial kickoff film of the same name to the very lackluster Mickey Rooney starring 1991 Part 5 and a 2012 remake starring Malcolm McDowell. Some you can say it in. The reason I'm bringing it up because I will talk about it and I will address it here in just a few minutes. But as I said it just a few seconds ago, this film is good, but it is extremely flawed. Story beat and even somewhat structure-wise, this movie kind of reminds me of the Friday the 13th remake. The way that film kind of essentially tried to take the first three films of the series franchise and kind of weave them into one large story that somehow still was 90 minutes. And that's what this story does. This story essentially kind of stretches itself too thin. I feel like a little part. I really wish they would have taken a page out of Halloween and really set this the day before Christmas. So this film takes place essentially from December 20th to December 25th. And I feel like at first it's really interesting. Once the film kind of approaches its third act, it really does start to fall apart. So within the first two acts of this film, they do kind of set up these subplots that essentially seem to go nowhere and then just kind of come roaring in like the kids from the Weapons finale in its final act and in its climax, I guess you could say. I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about this film's ending and a lot of feelings about this film's third act. This movie also has a grindhouse type feel to it, which I really appreciate it. It kind of got somewhat old a little bit, but its aesthetic really kind of gave it a really unique visual identity. What I mean by that is essentially any time that Billy would go to start to kill his next victim, there was almost kind of this really heavy reds and really heavy blues that we would see kind of cutaway scenes where you would kind of see how he would envision all of the horrible things of the people he's getting ready to kill did, but also he had these title cards that really just kind of felt like an old school grindhouse type feel to it that I really appreciated, where it would say kill whatever the name of the victim was. Rohan Campbell and Ruby Modine really have impeccable chemistry here. Their love story is kind of the anchor of this, and also some of the redemption of the story as well that really surprised me in a really kind of honestly surprising way that I really enjoyed and really kept me, again, much like the visuals, kept me engaged and kept me wanting to know what happened next, even if towards the end of the movie it does get a tad predictable. I think Campbell really redeems himself from Halloween Ends here as well. I know there felt like there was an audible groan that kind of had this ripple effect throughout the internet when he got announced with this project, because Ends just felt like such a polarizing film. You either really loved it or you really hated it, kind of in the middle. I'm one of those weirdos that kind of loved things about it, kind of hated some things about it, but ultimately ended up respecting it. Go check out our episode on Abyss Gazing, all about it. Campbell gives a really nuanced performance here, and I really appreciate that. I also appreciate what Mike P. Nelson did with the script here. I'll talk about that in just a second. But if you've seen the original Silent Night, Deadly Night, you know this film had every potential to just kind of be another forgettable slasher remake, and they did something really creative with that. I think large part of that comes not only from the script from Nelson, but also the complexities and the emotion that Campbell brings to this character, and almost charm as well. I feel like I have to say almost, because if I say anything other than almost. I feel like it spoils the film's kind of second half. I better safe than sorry. So if you don't know the name Mike P. Nelson, he is the madman responsible for the Jason Voorhees comeback short film Sweet Revenge we got earlier this year, as well as the 2021 remake of Wrong Turn. Now that one he just directed. The original writer of Wrong Turn came back to write that one. Both films are incredibly slept on, especially The Wrong Turn. When we talk about horror from the last 5 years, I think it's one of the better films we've gotten from the genre when it comes into the remake subcategory. And Silent Night, Deadly Night continues on that tradition. This is one of those films that, even though I might not necessarily like what Nelson does here with some of the character choices, especially in the third act of this film, I respect the fuck out of this, because he took some big swings with this film, really made it his own, and really did, I think, make quite a large impression here on the viewers and really shook up what a remake could actually do. I think this film is paced almost perfectly. Now, granted, I do have some issues with the narrative, but as far as the pacing, this film never lags. It never has a dull moment, and above all, it is very intentional about its time. And I really love how the backstory that we get, while it is the cold open to this film, much like the original film, that cold open actually is kind of this like lingering subplot throughout the course of the film, to where you kind of get a fuller picture the deeper into the film we get. And I really respected that choice, and I thought it worked out really well in the favor of the narrative. The gags here are some of my favorite of any genre picture this year. I really loved the gags, especially the viral Nazi one that went live earlier this year. But I think the way that the gags kind of play into the narrative is really smart on Nelson's part. I really love how there are portions of this film that you think are just kind of throwaway, and then the more you kind of get into it, the more you see, oh no, this is actually something that is intentional, that is playing into this grand finale. And again, he's very intentional, even if there are moments with it that do feel kind of strange or do fall flat. Again, the intentionality that Nelson has here is admirable. With that said, I'm ready to run Silent Night, Deadly Night through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Mike P. Nelson's Silent Night, Deadly Night a 3.5 out of 5. Overall, this is a very well done remake. I think Rohan Campbell does an incredible job here. The script and direction by Nelson is impeccable. Even if there are some issues with the narrative, I really do think this film suffers from a really sloppy third act, but it is an act that I will respect the hell out of it for the major swings that it has developed going into the climax. Nelson could have delivered another generic slasher, and instead he gives this emotionally complex film that really does deliver on mental health and the lasting impacts of trauma. And yeah, if you guys have seen the Silent Night, Deadly Night remake from 2025, what did you guys think about it? Comment below, let me know. If you have not and you're planning to see it, let me know in the show notes below. But we are going to be covering this in length with our buddies over at Collateral Cinema Podcast. Every year we do a Christmas crossover with them. This year we're doing Santa's Sleigh, celebrating 20 years of Goldberg here on Abyss Gazing, and we will be talking about Silent Night, Deadly Night over there with them in length and with spoilers. Let's talk about mental health, shall we? If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're reviewing, talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. I will say one of the things that this film does extraordinarily well is address the lasting impacts that trauma has on a body and an individual, especially as young as 8 years old, that we see here in this cold open with our main character, Billy. And while I won't get into the spoilers of the trauma, because it definitely plays into the climax of this film, I will say the way that Mike P. Nelson kind of captures this lingering effect that trauma can have on the body and on the mind, and also on the identity of the individual, is probably one of the best representations that I've seen in a long time. I think that's something that we oftentimes forget about in the conversation of mental health, the effects that the nature versus nurture really do have an effect on the identity of an individual, how we see the world, and ultimately how we see ourselves. One of the things that Billy really struggles with throughout the course of the film's first 2 acts of this film is really kind of seeing himself as having not a lot of self-worth and not a lot of self-love. And again, it is because of what we kind of see in the cold open of this film, but it also demonstrates that traumatic events in our developmental age really can shape us moving forward and how we see ourselves and also how we interact with ourselves. Sometimes the very things that we call normal that are not societally normal in those developmental stages actually can have ramifications for us as adults, and really how we see the world, how we interact, and ultimately how we kind of go about doing our day-to-day lives. Now, I'm not speaking from a clinical standpoint here. I am kind of speaking also from personal experience and the therapy journey that I've been on for the last couple of years, and really ultimately the journey that we find Billy on in this film as well. Silent Night, Deadly Night is now playing in theaters everywhere from CINEVERSE and Bloody Disgusting. We'll provide links in the show notes below where you guys can check your local listings. This one is a lot of fun overall. Please go check it out. And please check out our full-length review on this when we team up with our friends over at Collateral Cinema Podcast. Make sure that you guys follow them on all of their social medias, as well as following us, which are in the show notes below. Links to it, as well as more movie reviews like this, links to our podcast network, mental health resource library, and that subscribe button. So until next time, keep it holly, keep it jolly, keep it spooky, keep it classy. Have a great night.